There's a modern building in Hartford, Connecticut, just off of Bushnell Park. On this building is a historical plaque which says that Frederic Edwin Church, the Hudson River School artist, spent his childhood in a house on this site. Well, I have to tell you that I think the plaque is wrong. It's not wrong about the fact that Church, the famous landscape painter, who was born in the city in 1826, grew up in a house on Trumbull Street, but it marks the wrong location for his childhood home. Hi, this is History with me, Dan. In this video, I want to tell you why I think there was a mistake made with that historic plaque, tell you where Frederic Church's childhood home actually stood, and also tell you about an interesting house that was just next door. Frederic Edwin Church was one of the greatest American landscape painters of the 19th century, who painted many dramatic scenes both in the United States and around the world. His estate near the Hudson River, called Olana, is now a New York State historic site. At the start of his artistic career, Church received vital support from Daniel Wadsworth, a major patron of art in Hartford, who founded the Wadsworth Atheneum in the city, which was the country's first public art museum. Frederic Church came from a prosperous family. His grandfather had established a paper mill in Lee, Massachusetts, and his father, Joseph Church, was a successful jeweler in Hartford, first on Ferry Street and later on Main Street. We know of 3 houses where Joseph Church and his family lived in Hartford. The first, the house where his son, Frederic Church the artist, was born, was located on Temple Street between Market and Front Street. That block, shown here in the 1877 bird's eye view of Hartford, no longer exists. Part of the Constitution Plaza development is on this site today. The Church family's next home was on Trumbull Street. Going by the historic plaque, it would have been located near the southern end of Trumbull, close to Bushnell Park, on the east side of the street, just a few doors down from where Salute Restaurant is today. As I said, I think this is the incorrect location, but I think I understand why the plaque was placed here. In the Gears Hartford City directories of the period, such as this one from 1847, Joseph Church's address is given as 28 Trumbull Street. The earliest atlas of the city of Hartford that provides street numbers was the one published in 1880. That atlas does indeed show 28 Trumbull Street, near the location where the plaque is today. But it's fairly clear that the numbers on Trumbull Street had been changed earlier in the 19th century. In fact, before that change, the even numbers were on the west side of the street, rather than on the east side of the street, as in the 1880 atlas. Take, for example, Case, Lockwood, and Brainerd, the printing company, which was located on the west side of Trumbull Street at the corner of Pearl Street. Its predecessor at the same location back in 1847 was called Case, Tiffany & Company. The 1847 directory gives Case, Tiffany & Company an address of 12 Trumbull Street, which shows that 28 Trumbull Street would have been even further north on the west side of the street. Joseph Church's obituary, published in the Hartford Courant in 1876, notes that his former home on Trumbull Street was now the home of Dr. Hawley. Reading that reminded me of a video I made about the section of Trumbull Street where there were a number of buildings that were eventually replaced by the Hartford Civic Center. One of the buildings on that block was the old Hartford County Courthouse, built back in the early 1880s. That building had replaced an earlier structure, which was, you guessed it, the home of Dr. George B. Hawley, a noted Hartford physician. So now let's turn to a section of Smith's 1850 plan of the city of Hartford. This map does not indicate street numbers, but it does label most of the property owners and landmarks downtown. It shows Case Tiffany and Company at the corner of Trumbull Street and Pearl Street. Further north, at the corner of Trumbull and Asylum, it shows the home of Timothy M. Allen. Just a few years after this map, Allen would build the Allen House Hotel on this site, adjacent to his house. And just 2 doors further north, it shows the home of Joseph Church. This then was the actual location of the childhood home of Joseph's son, the artist Frederic Edwin Church. The house was later occupied by Dr. Hawley and then was torn down to be replaced by the Hartford County Courthouse. Today, this spot is part of the large block occupied by the Hartford Civic Center, now called the People's Bank Arena. So the correct placement of the sign should be on the east side of the People's Bank Arena, somewhere between the signs for Key Bank and Yukon. I mentioned earlier that we know of 3 homes that were occupied by Joseph Church. When he later left the Trumbull Street house, he built a new house at 624 Asylum Avenue. His son, the artist, was already an adult by this time. Sadly, the Italianate-style Joseph Church house on Asylum was torn down in 1916. The Hartford Courant featured a photograph of this house just before it was torn down. The only image I know of the earlier house on Trumbull Street is its depiction on the 1877 bird's eye view of Hartford. Between the Allen House Hotel and the Church House was another building with an interesting history. This was a Federal-style house. From 1831 until 1863, it was the home of Miss Draper's Seminary, a school for girls operated by Julia Draper, assisted by her sisters, Eliza, Charlotte, Emily, and Catherine. The Connecticut River Valley was an epicenter for female education at the time. The Draper sisters had had an earlier school in Greenfield, Massachusetts, and in Hartford, their school was just across Trumbull Street from Pratt Street, where Harriet Beecher Stowe's older sister Catherine operated the Hartford Female Seminary. Getting back to Miss Draper's Seminary, one of the school's pupils in the 1850s was Louise Griswold, sister of Florence Griswold. The sisters and their family later opened their home in Old Lyme, Connecticut, as a school for girls. Near the end of the 19th century, Florence Griswold rented out rooms in her home to the many artists who made Old Lyme an art colony in the early 20th century. This brings us back to that prominent earlier artist, Frederic Edwin Church, who grew up right next to the Draper Seminary in Hartford. Church, who died in 1900, is also buried in the city at Spring Grove Cemetery. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to hit the like button, and you can also subscribe to the channel. You can also check out my Substack, which is linked in the description below. Thanks for watching.